emphasizing, starting out, the importance of having a website. I'm actually just going to use my website to navigate around to give my lecture. So the way that I wanted to structure this was to talk a little bit about where I left off from my final year as a B.F.A., how my work evolved in graduate school, and then moving from that into my current role at Madame Tussauds, and then bringing that back around, how I'm still using so many things that I learned from USAO every day at my job that I have now. So Jackie gave me a great intro, but I also wanted to tell you guys that I'm from Wayne, Oklahoma. Anyone been there? Know where Wayne is? It's one of those blink and you miss it kind of places. And I grew up really rural, and I came to Chickasha, which was the first time I'd lived in a town in my life, in 2008, which I can't believe it's almost been 10 years since I first got here. And I always had an interest in drawing and painting, but I'd never oil painted before until I came to USAO. And the work you're looking at now is work that were included in my B.F.A. exhibition. So I, as Jackie said, primarily work in painting. And I also always had an interest in anatomy. Growing up on 200 acres, I'd seen many a horse and cow carcass, and that had always stuck with me, how creepy but fascinating that was. And also it's such an iconic image in the South and the West, you know, a cow skull. And I wanted to take that and turn it into something just by its own natural qualities, just by looking at it from a different perspective, could make it seem so foreign. So this is all still life though. I would literally bring in horse skulls and put colored lights on them because from, you know, an early time being here at USAO instilled within me that appreciation for observation. I always am a firm believer that all the inspiration you need is pretty much right in front of you at most times. You know, it just takes the research to do it. So that's where I was with my B.F.A., thinking more technically about trying to get as close as I could to my observational analysis of what I was looking at. And this is an image, actually my first studio space in graduate school, and I was carrying on from there, trying to find my way, where I wanted to take my artwork. So you can see I have a still life set up back there, and I'm painting from it. But I ultimately found that that was a dead end for me, because there was this attachment I think I had to bones with, you know, growing up around them, that no one else could really tap into. And so conceptually and content-wise, I wasn't unable to unlock a meaningful conversation with my viewer. And so for pretty much a year, my first year at graduate school, I did a ton of paintings that are garbage now. They're done. I didn't, you know, at the time I was doing them, I was like, I don't know why I'm doing these. You know, it was just, you're influenced so heavily by this whole new world, a new city, new instructors, new theories, new things you may have never heard. And so for pretty much a year, I just kind of made paintings. I did a ton of portraits, trying to find my footing. And really the turning point came when I did this painting here. And this was, at the time, the biggest painting I'd ever made. Most of my B.F.A. paintings were 30 inches or smaller, and this is 6 feet by 4 feet. And this is a painting of my teeth. And I did a drawing of them, and then I would look in a mirror, do this, and then paint and go back and forth, because looking at something, knowing it as close as you can, I think is so important to conveying that through the work that you're doing. And so what brought me to this work is that I still had this interest in anatomy, and I was thinking about kind of what it really means to be something that's like, we're all matter, like we're all essentially organic material, and how that kind of plays on you know, the way like our psychological viewpoint in terms of how we view our own bodies, how we view our loved ones, or anyone that we come in contact with. And so I chose my teeth because I have terrible teeth. My whole family has bad teeth. And I thought, the whole psychology with teeth, there's tons of writing on it, on how it plays such a powerful impact with like the social norms, smiling or hiding your teeth, or it serves a very basic function to your well-being, and an idea that there's a lot of like vanity and a lot of other things bound up with our teeth. So that's where I started. I just started with looking at my own body and my imperfections, and of course there's a ton of artists who are already doing this. If you guys know Jenny Seville, that's very in line with the work that she does. So that's where it started, and for a while, while I was making this painting, I had been talking to visiting artists that would come and I'd have studio visits with about going into a cadaver lab. That was something that I had always been interested in, but I really didn't know, how do I make that happen? Is there even a cadaver lab at UNLV? And UNLV is such a massive campus compared to USAO. And it really came about, the girl that was working as the assistant in the art office, she said, yeah, I've been through a cadaver lab. I've been on tour in there. And I go, well, who runs it? And she's like, I'm not sure, but maybe I can shoot some people an email. And so she started emailing people. I started emailing people. I literally just went on the UNLV website, looked up anyone who was in a field related to science, biology, medicine, and say, hey, do you guys have a cadaver lab? Well, I'm an art student. This is my purposes. I even got emails back from people that said, no, we don't have a cadaver lab. And that was weird. So, and I thought, well, what now? And then so after a bunch of emailing, finally, I found that the person who ran the cadaver lab, and there was one, was the head of the physical therapy department, that they utilized the cadaver lab to learn about joints. And so I emailed him and tell him, hey, I'm an art student in the graduate program, and I'm interested in using cadavers as a visual resource for my artwork. Is there any way, that we could set this up? And he was very receptive to it. Beyond emailing, I actually wrote up a formal proposal and had the chair of my graduate committee look it over and sign it and okay it. And from there, I gained access to the cadaver lab, which I had never been in. I'd never seen a cadaver, but I was forcing myself to go there because I knew that was the research that I wanted for my work. And so I got acquainted with the cadaver lab. I got shown how to handle the bodies, and then I was ultimately allowed to work by myself, which is another eerie feeling, to be all by yourself in the cadaver lab. And also, it was I was looking at it through a scope of pure visual information. I wasn't thinking about scientific dissection, maybe a little bit for like reminiscent of it, but that wasn't my intent. My intent was to just see and be near and learn as much as I could from essentially a body in that state. And so, much like Jericho for his painting The Raft of the Medusa, he would do the same thing where he would research bodies, and he has a lot of really great studies of decapitated heads and arms and all these different things, and that's how he would get his research too. And the way that they're put together, it's like a still life. And it made me think of when I was putting together, still lifes of bones and looking for interesting, things that I thought would be good for a painting. I would be like excavating this body and like, well, I'm gonna put this intestine here and let's see what this looks like. And so that was really a crazy, unique experience. And this is the first painting I made out of the cadaver lab, because when I first went, I was still thinking about skin, and the only parts on the bodies that still had skin were the toes and the hands, because they had been, as the professor that headed the cadaver lab said, deconstructed. And so this is the first painting that I made. It's 4 feet by 4 feet, and then from it I did along with it a hand as well. So those were my first paintings from the cadaver lab. But then another turning point was this painting right here, and it's 4 feet by 6 feet. And that's when I started really thinking about the internal body as opposed to the external, and thinking about just how bizarre it looks. And this is within all of us, it's like we're so, like, this is what comprises our existence, but it's so bizarre and strange to us at the same time. And so this is the painting that really set me on for the foundation for my thesis work, being studying abjection and the destabilizing effect that something as horrifying as, you know, a corpse has on us. And the reason that it's so destabilizing is because it's pure ambiguity, because someone, like a corpse is you, but it's not you. If, you know, if I were to drop dead right now, I'd be Wendy, but I'm not Wendy anymore. I'm now somebody, but then I would be a body. And so that shift right there is such a powerful thing for us to even, you know, think about. But we never think about it because we push it away. We push it away from our reality, even though it's something we all have in common. Every single one of us and everyone we've ever known, it's a universal thing. And so I really started to think about using painting as a platform for bringing that conversation to the forefront of people's minds by making paintings that I thought had, you know, color, brushstroke, materiality that would draw people in to want to look at something that in reality is of, you know, an object or a subject that no one, I don't think, I'm using that term very loosely, but not many people would, I think, want to engage with otherwise. And I have some installation views. This is from my midway exhibition in my program. In the middle of your time at the university, you do a midway where you show this is where I'm at. Am I up to snuff? Can I make it into candidacy and really pursue a thesis here? And so this was my midway exhibition. A couple of installation shots of it to give you guys some sense of size and scale. And I lit it really terribly. I lit it so terribly, like the light is way too far down. So that's another thing. Let's talk about advice. If you don't know how to light your chill, get someone in there to give you some feedback at least. So from there, from that painting that I was just talking about, it's titled Lung. I did another lung painting where I was thinking about, you know, just really tight cropping, just really obscuring, you know, different parts of the body, so that it was really like, what is this, you know? And so this painting's a bit smaller. I think it's only like 24 by 24 inches, but I was still really interested in pushing that scale, because the thing is, in grad school, hopefully you have a good space and you have, hopefully you're applying for grants or you have loans or something. I was never gonna have that kind of space and that kind of money and that kind of resource from my colleagues to make huge paintings, for me, what were huge paintings, except for that moment, you know. It's just, once you get out of grad school, then you gotta, like Kiri was saying, you know, it's a lot of fees and a lot of, you know, rent money to set up those things on your own. So this is where my work started progressing for my thesis. This is a 5.5 foot by, or 5 foot by 4.5 feet by 6 feet. It's around that size. And this is where I really started thinking about, I think, painting, because I don't even think I knew what it was about painting that I was interested in until I went to graduate school. Up until that point, I was so concerned with the idea of mimesis, with what I'm looking at and recreating that as best as I can on a canvas. And then I started thinking about, I'm like, well, if it's all about recreation, you know, I'm not really doing painting a service, because I'm not really letting the painting speak for itself. So what's the point of using paint if we're not going to talk about paint, is what I started to think. So this is kind of just a small detail, but I started really thinking about how the thinness of the paint versus the thickness of the paint was going to make such a bigger impact on the subject matter too. Because in the end of the day, I was talking about materiality, the material of the paint, the material of the body. And so you can see I've started to build up the canvas a bit, but I also liked having differing layers as well. So I would still have some thin layers in there as well. And then I started getting bigger. So this is 8 feet by 5 feet. And this was the first painting where I was letting the canvas show. And you know, the whole entire time I was making this painting, I hated it. I hated this painting, and I was, you know, everything in me, I was so used to covering the whole entire canvas from side to side and painting in a certain way, and I got so stuck and used to the way that I did things that I literally had to tell myself, just stop, step away from it, quit working on it because you're gonna ruin it. And so, you know, when you're doing work, it's important to remember, you know, what is your end goal? Do you have an end goal in mind? And not to just be making work because that's the way you've always made that work. You know, it's important, I think, to always challenge yourself, to open up to that. Here's like a little detail of the, you know, a little paint booger it looks like. And I really started to embrace that too. You know, I you know, would let paint dry on my palette and scrape it off and put it on there, and you know, things that you're told not to do, I started to do more. And that's kind of, in this painting, there's a lot of turp drip, there's a lot of white canvas, and there's a really thick section right here. It was just a huge glob of paint that I had accidentally let it set up and dry, and I thought, you know, I was like, that's getting used. So that got put in there. And to me, that's the great part about painting, that's the fun part. And like Tina always says, if it's not fun, why do it? That's what you're saying, so so here's an installation shot of both of those paintings in my thesis in the University Gallery at UNLV. Excuse me. And like we were talking about a little bit about exhibiting work, it's so important to think about how pieces talk to one another too, how placement is important. How is it when your viewer walks into the gallery, what's the first thing they're gonna see? How far do you want them standing back from it? And I think the thing is to realize, like, if you're putting together a show, especially a solo show, you may not have that opportunity right now, but hopefully you will at some point, and you should realize, like, these are things you can affect. You can affect how someone interacts with your artwork just by the way that you guide them through it. This is another painting. I'm like, the color is really terrible on this screen. I feel bad. I'm like, it looks so much better on the monitor, but it's a green and pink painting. And this painting is when I really started thinking about how drawing influenced my work, because I always would do preliminary sketches. So do your preliminary sketches before every painting. And I was thinking, you know, I do all of this technical drawing before I start painting, so why doesn't that have a place within the painting as well? And so this painting, I started thinking about how can I use more paint and how can I also talk about drawing? So with the linear elements, I actually used like a piping bag for icing to apply all of the line work, and then I just picked what I thought were the visually enticing areas of the painting to more fully render with oil paint. And you can see here's a detail of one section of line from that painting. And here it is with another painting. I really liked that technique for this painting because looking at it from the side, that image really starts to fall apart, and it does just look like, you know, a bunch of jarbled up, maybe like intestines or something very like fleshy looking. So here's some other installation views, and as well I had, it's not a great photo, but I had some small preliminary drawings actually exhibited, and then I had, I put together booklets of all the research that I was studying for my thesis, it being the kind of subject matter that is hard to tap into, it can be hard to articulate. And I was studying so much, you know, from psychoanalysts and art historians, and you know, there's so many things that I read it, and when I read it, I was like, that's it, that's what I'm talking about. And so I thought, you know, that's connecting with me so much when I'm making the work, so why not also provide this to the viewer as well? And so it became like a little visual reader that people could take and then walk about the exhibition. And so while they're reading, you know, a selection of text, then they look up at the painting, and then maybe they look back at the text, and so they're engaging in that manner. And this is just another exhibition view, and I think we're back to the bottom part. Where did my, I was like, we're in the viewer, I was like, where did my menu go? So how that segued into Madame Tussauds is that I graduated this past last spring, sorry, with my M.F.A, time flies. And I taught while I was a graduate assistant as well, and so I'd stayed on at UNLV, and I was teaching a summer drawing class, and I get a message from an acquaintance I had that I met through networking, going to shows in the Las Vegas community. We'd seen each other and knew each other a little bit, and he messaged me and said, "Are you looking for a job?" And I said, "Well, it depends, And so he says, "Well, all right, I'll call you with the details." So he calls me and he says, "It's for Madame Tussauds," and I'm thinking, "What is that?" And I think, isn't that wax figure thing? And I'm thinking, and so he goes, "Just come in and I'll give you a tour of, the attraction, as we call it, in the studio space." And the moment that I saw the studio, which unfortunately I can't show to you guys due to company policy, I was hooked. I was like, oh, here's the oil paint, here is, wax, all these materials I'm used to, because I didn't know, as you guys don't know, is that they're all painted in oil paint. And the whole reason that I got that job is because I had been referred by the director of the gallery at UNLV because of my thesis work, because I had so intensely studied anatomy and oil painting specifically. That's how I was, at the forefront of someone's mind for referring me for that position. And so I've been working there under a year now. I gotta put in the password. Oh, one moment. There we go. Just under a year. And so what Madame Tussauds is, it's a wax figure attraction. They prefer the term attraction over museum, actually, because museum implies that you can't interact or you can't touch, but you actually can touch the figures and get close to them. You can touch their hair, their skin, and it's been around since the 1800s. The main studio is established in London, is still there today, and every single figure is made in the London studio and then shipped out to their various locations around the globe for viewing. And so I'm going to show you guys a short video about the making of a figure from beginning to finish, and it's actually for one of our figures in Las Vegas of Lady Gaga.
Two sculptors working on it. We have one working on the body, another working on the head. The clay process takes about 5 weeks. You're slowly adding clay to the metal armature. Underneath, structurally, it's all correct. What we try and do is not only get all that accuracy, the likeness, but the vibrancy and the character of the person showing through as well. And on the fashion method, we're getting all those details in by hand. The next process is the moulding. The figure is moulded in 2 parts, the head and the body separately. The head is cast in plaster, in exactly the same way as it would have been done 100 or 200 years ago. The head is separated into sections with clay walls. Plaster is flipped onto it, and slowly you build up each individual little segment, and ultimately you end up with a piece of plaster mould with a plaster jacket on. And then that is taken off the clay, reassembled, and the wax is poured in. Although we have 8 different Lady Gagas, there are obviously some elements of her that are consistent. Her eyes and her teeth are the same for all of the figures. The eyes are made from acrylic. They have little silk threads for the veins. They're hand painted, and we fit them once they're made into each of the heads. Same goes with the teeth. They're made from dental acrylic. They are crafted to match hers exactly, and then they are fitted inside the wax head. The hair and colouring process is a real skill. The hair is individually inserted. In the case of Lady Gaga, we use a combination of hair extensions, wigs, all manner of things in order to create the overall effect. We have an amazing group of artists. They then colour it to match exactly the skin tone. The paint is built up in layers using a number of techniques, splattering, brushing, all manner of different things in order to create something that is very skin-like with paint rather than makeup. We've got to create the effect of makeup on skin. So we would create the look of her real skin, then slowly build up the makeup and the effect of the makeup, lashes, eyebrow effects. You have to start off with the real person underneath. Make sure that each look is exactly like she would have it. As I said, we have the 8 looks. They all have to be carefully worked out, carefully planned in order that they work not only from a visual point of view, but from a maintenance point of view. Figures going in an attraction where it's going to get awful lot of attention. Ultimately, our main job is to make sure it looks absolutely right. Rather than having one style, with Lady Gaga, obviously she has so many iconic looks, and of course how on earth could you just pick one? So we have 8 figures, so we have 8 different styles. They're all individual, they all are exclusive to each attraction, and we've got some wonderful involvement from some designers like Armani, Philip Tracy, so we're very excited. Because we've created 8 Lady Gagas, it's brought its own challenges. What we've had to do is do 2 moulds from the same clay head in order to make sure that the casts, the wax casts from them, are as good quality. On occasions the mould slightly deteriorates. We didn't want any of this, so we've done multiple moulds. The head has been brought back to surface again, remoulded, so that we're sure that the 8th one is as good as the first one.
I'm sure the first part of the video looks very familiar to some of you guys. So pretty much how when you're doing sculpture 2, stop it. That's very similar. That kind of classical sculpture that you guys learn here at USAO is the same thing that they're doing in this London studio. So that's the entire creation from the main studio. So where I come into play with that is that, so like the final finished product, that's our Lady Gaga we have in Las Vegas. And he mentioned a little bit about maintenance. And that's really my job, is to maintain the figures. And so what happens is that I probably have a staged action shot. So this couple of our figures in the attraction, Oscar Goodman and our showgirl, who is like, she's not a specific showgirl. She was like, they hired a model to do a sitting and then created her for, you know, a person who's not specific. But what I'm doing, like in this shot, is like the wooden burnishing tools you would use in hand building. We use every day. Every morning I have to be there at 7 a.m. for the walkthrough, we call it, as the attraction opens at 10. So we have 3 hours, and every single morning, me and my team of artists that I'm on, and I'm the new blood, we walk through and check every single figure for scratches. Is mostly the damage that they sustain. People, you know, accidentally end up scratching, or sometimes purposely scratching, you never know. and or the hair as well. These two don't have a lot of hair going on, but we brush and style their hair, make sure it's looking neat, and then we fix all the scratches, fix their wardrobe, make sure all the flies are zipped, all kinds of crazy things that you would never think would be just like part of your morning routine. And so we walk completely through, make sure everything's okay in that 3 hours. So if something has more sustainable damage, and it does happen, like an ear is broken off, or there's a finger broken, something like that. If we have time, you take the head, take it back to the studio, run back in there, and you just re-sculpt it real fast and put it back on there. So there's a slight element of pressure, but if something is, irreparable, at least for the amount of time that we have in the morning, then the figure just gets taken off the floor until the damage can be repaired. And then similarly, when painting comes into place, and I chose her because I painted her as well recently, or she was one of the first heads that I painted. So from time to time, after sustaining little bits of damage day after day after day, it really starts to take a toll on the paint job overall and the wax underneath. And so then you have to bring it back to the studio, and we take turpentine and pull off all the paint completely. So like when I pulled Lady Gaga out of the mold and she's just that pale pink wax, that's what we pull it back to that, and then it's my job to repaint it the way, to the standard it was painted originally. And if there's damage or there's something needs to be rebuilt, the thing is that some of these figures are like almost 20 years old. And so after so many times of being the paint pulled off and repainted, the turp starts to eat away the wax. And so a lot of people have really wide eyes. So you have to rebuild their eyelids and go back in and make any adjustments that may be necessary. And so that's part of my duties as well. And with her, like he was talking about, it's funny because a lot of people think that we use real makeup, but it is all oil paint. And it's interesting to think about, you're painting on a 3D object as well, which is a lot of painters don't do, and then thinking about making it look like the illusion of makeup on skin, but it's paint. This is Lindsay Lohan, who's one that I've painted, and I've curled her hair a bit, which I'm still working on. I know they're like, you know how to curl hair, right? Like, you're a girl. And I was like, you see this hairdo? So that's another thing that I'm still learning, which I love about the job, is that there's a lot of room for growth for me as well. I can bring what I know to the table, but I can also learn a lot of new skills, and that's great. That's great for just being a versatile artist, but also influencing your own work process as well. And it's funny, once you paint a figure, you have like a slight attachment to it for a little bit. And so my boss had painted Angelina Jolie around the time I painted Lindsay Lohan, and it's like I'd never cared about Lindsay Lohan so much in my life until after I painted this, became like slightly protective for a little bit. But then you also, it's like what's going out there, like you just accept, like, well, it's gonna get damaged and be there to fix it again. And this is, I think, did I turn this off? This mouse. Did it die, Jackie?
Possibly. Sometimes it's on a battery.
Oh, well, anyway.
You can pick it up on the other mouse.
Yeah, I'll get it. Sorry about that. So this is Madame Tussaud herself. We actually have a couple figures of her, but I just finished painting her earlier this week, and so she got put back onto the floor. And she was my first real job with hair insertion. Like you saw, we do it each hair individually, and with her, I had to insert her eyebrows. And what we do is we take a sewing needle and you take clippers and you cut the eye in half, and that's what you pick up every hair with to insert. And so I inserted her eyebrows and then painted her, which she was a lot of fun. She's an older person to paint, and really getting in there and getting like textures and wrinkles and things was a really exciting job for me to do. But again, like, I'm still learning as well, so it's still something that I'm cultivating. But back to how that ties into USAO is that part of the reason, like, for my interview to this job, I felt so confident is that I was able to say, Yeah, I've worked with wax, or I've done sculpture. I feel confident with that, you know. So not only was it my degree and my time spent at UNLV, but it was USAO as well. And you don't know how many times I'm sitting in the studio at Madame Tussauds in Las Vegas, and I'm thinking time and time again about the sculpture classes I took here, about the jewelry making classes, and I'm so glad that I've retained that information. It looks like we're running out of time, so I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you.